Who's Georgie White, and kind of what does she mean to you, and like why would you want to come to this deal?
She was the first. She was the number one. She sort of started it all. Grand old lady of the Colorado. And what a lady. Coolest lady. Just her eyes and her way. There's nobody like her. She's one of a kind. Broke the mold. And God, I hope she's down there forever. I mean, there's no such thing, but I hope they let her do it until the canyon takes her. That's how it should be. That's probably how it will be. I'm sure. Like for myself. So I want to do it too.
You want to do it until you're gone, huh?
Yeah, I'd like to go down there and stay down there. Hopefully we can let Georgie stay down there. Kind of hard to do nowadays, but at least sprinkle me down there. Rather let the ravens eat me, but sprinkle me down there at least. And maybe we'll be, by the time I die, maybe I can have the ravens smorgasbord on my bones. Leave my bones to bleach somewhere on some cliff.
Well, so how'd you come to it?
I started out old Shorty Burton took me on my first trip down through Yampa and Ladora through Dinosaur. When we moved out there, I was 12 years old. We moved from Salt Lake City to Vernal, Utah. My dad owned a truck line, and he didn't like the idea of living in Salt Lake. It was too smoky and whatnot. I liked it. It was good skiing there in Salt Lake. I was kind of hating moving to Vernal, but as it turned out, it was all right. And we moved out there, and I turned 12, and somewhere around, it wasn't on my birthday, but for my 12th birthday, on top of getting a bike that I still have, 10-speed bike, we went on this river trip through, started at the Yampa. It's called Deer Lodge Park or something like that. And went down through the Yampa to where it joins the Green and at Echo Park, and took out right there at the monument headquarters. And Shorty Burton was the boatman. Did it in like a 22-foot old bridge pontoon that Hatch rows. I think they still row them up there. And Shorty was great. Taught me how to bake biscuits in a Dutch oven and stuff. Let me row a lot. I was hooked. So then from there, my dad bought a old 10-man raft with the bumper tube on it and everything. And we rigged that up, put some oarlocks on it. Took it down the river quite a few times as I was growing up and going through high school and stuff. And I was just waiting until I was 18 to talk to Ted and say I'm ready for a job, and went out and a winter break. Went to the U of U for a quarter and came home for a Christmas break and went and talked to Ted and said, well, hoping you could need somebody. I was hoping I might get a job up there in Dinosaur. And Ted goes, well, when could you start? I says, well, probably, next week. It's fine. Get you on patching boats next week and see how you work out. So I went and quit school. Parents weren't too excited about it, but they knew I really wanted to do it, so they let me do it. And I quit school, and only for a quarter, of course, and or the rest of the year there. And I went to work for Ted. Patched boats all spring, and about March. Those days we started about March. Went down and did a training trip. There's like 12 trainees. Chuck Carpenter and Rick Petrillo, a bunch of old timers that aren't even around anymore. Whale was in there somewhere. Pat Conley, he was on that trip. We all piled into one training boat. And there were so many of us, it wasn't that much fun to ride in the training boat, so I rode with old Dave Bledsoe most of the time. He was one of the boatmen on the trip, and there was, I don't know, gosh, must have been 7 or 8 boats on the trip. It was a big old trip. They don't even allow that kind of trip anymore. And made her on through the canyon. The only rapid I actually motored was Lava Falls, and just about flipped. We left the side tubes on and we ran it down the ride. I think they wanted to see some action because they always took their side tubes off, or, well, they didn't have side tubes in those days. They were old tail dragger hatch rigs. The only rig that had they called them training wheels in those days. The only rig that had the side tubes was the training boat. And I think they were just lazy. They could have taken the side tubes off, no problem, but they thought, well, let's watch these trainees run this rig. And since I'd been running with Bledsoe all trip, and that was like I hadn't run any big rapids. I'd just been riding with Bledsoe, and he'd been talking me through it. They put me on the stick, and so I was running the motor, and we probably dropped over about the ledge. I don't know. We were going down the right, but there was one big old wave right on top that I remember. And as we dropped over it, the transom broke because it was only bolted on with like 6 quarter-inch bolts, and of the 6, probably 4 of them were busted, and one side, all 3 of them busted that were holding one side on it. Dropped it down, just about lost the darn transom engine and everything. Of course, the engine was chained to the transom, and I just remember like motoring along, and as soon as we dropped over that first drop, which was probably the right side of the ledge, my arm jerked way down. I was still holding on to the motor, but it was definitely swamped. And there was a look back there, and I couldn't see anything but my hand, and I knew I was hanging onto the handle, so I held onto it and went down sideways through the big hole and almost flipped. It was close. It was high water. I mean, it was probably 18,000. We used to get there early in the morning, as early as we could, because we always take the motors off and everything and just power over against the left shore and float down over the rocks. 2 guys rowing on a old hatch tail dragger rig.
And that was the run.
And that was the run. Just get as tight as you could on the left shore and just like slop her down over the rocks. And it was a great run. Actually worked good. I mean, those old boats had floors and stuff, and you didn't take them out there. And you could flip in lava. We flipped a couple of rigs there those early years. You didn't get down there on the right side into that hole.
What was it like running them, having to sit back there with the motor and stuff?
They were wild, boy. You had to hang on. You had like 3 straps. You had one you put your toes under, and one you put, kind of scissored between your legs, and one that you held on to your bucking strap if you had to pull your engine, which you had to do often. You'd grab onto that and hoist the engine out and hang on like crazy, because, boy, as you went over anything, it's like being on the back of a slingshot, and it'd stretch your arms pretty good.
And what were those big trips like, and why would they do them?
Oh, it was just, geology charters or whatever. A guy named Don Bars, he used to work for, I think he still is in Washington. He was like a geologist at Washington State, and he chartered some big ones. There was like one we did was 140 people, 17 boats. It was amazing. Fire pit that was like 20 feet long. Just this huge fire pit. We'd get about a cord of wood for every night. That was the wildest days.
A cord of wood just to cook dinner?
Yeah, I mean, that's an exaggeration, but it took a lot of wood. It took a pile. In those days, it was on most beaches, and we'd camp at the big camps. I think we camped at 75 and Nanquip.
Well, so did anybody think that was anything unusual? How did you?
Oh, yeah, it was wild. I mean, we had, one boat was just kitchen. That was the training boat, was the kitchen boat. And it was just like, we had these old stakes that we'd drive into the ground. Then it was just fires in the sand in those days. And we just built this big, long fire pit. It was about, 6 stakes long. And so you could put like 12 griddles on, and it was massive to do the cooking and whatnot for that big a size crew. But then we had this huge crew. We had a good, I think it was like 9 trainees that were, the new guys getting their first trip down there.
And they had to cook.
Well, we were all, y'all did it all. I mean, we didn't have to cook. I mean, Bledsoe and the old hands, Massey was on the trip, Dennis Massey, and heck, he'd had 10 years experience. He was I couldn't believe, he was an old timer that He'd been there forever. And yeah, we just all did it, you know. I mean, yeah, you were busy. It took a lot of work. It was a lot of people. We dropped them off at Phantom. We didn't take that many all the way through. It was like 60. It was a small trip, 68 people or something like that below Phantom. Doing the lower half. 10-day trips. Taking out at Temple Bar. Motor across the lake forever. Camp out at Sandy Point. The lake was a lot lower then. There was like no way you could even get close to Pierce's. It was just one big mud flat back there. And the river went on through, and there were mud bars clear out past Grand Wash Bay there.
What were the people like? And what kind of time did they have?
Oh, I had a great time. They probably changed a little, you know, especially motor people. They're more like the rowing people are nowadays. I think they were great. Really into it. It was really an adventure in those days, maybe more even than it is now with dories. Not really, though. Dories are always an adventure.
Well,
kind of can't help that.
What was it like? What was it like to just get through then?
Same as it is now. Great. Good feeling. Things are. I mean, there was a lot different back then. I mean, back when I started, none of the Tammies were taller than I was, which isn't very tall. And a lot more sand, a lot more beaches, a lot more wood. Boy, they were a mess, though. We had fire pits you wouldn't believe.
What about toilets?
Huh? Yeah, there weren't toilets. Actually, on that trip, we dug pits because there were just so damn many people that, yeah, you couldn't go high and far. But the general rule and general method in those days was high and far. Until, 72 or 3 before we started using any kind of porta potty. It might have even been after that, actually. It was more like 75 before the porta potties came in style. So anyway, off that motor came just to finish this trip, that first trip. The motor was just like hanging by one thing and underwater, and we got through the wrap and didn't flip, and we were all just like, whoa, because it was really close. I mean, the boat was on its side. I thought it was going over. Everybody thought it was going over. And there was just nothing to do, It's just like, the only thing I could do was hang on to that motor because I didn't want to lose it. And so as soon as we got through, Carpenter said, God, what happened? I said, well, I don't know, but the motor's like, look, my arm's like about 2 feet longer, and the motor handle's underwater. And Jesus, and so we reached down there and grabbed it and picked it up and tied it back on with a piece of line, piece of old sisal rope that we used to have, manila rope, and took us clear past Lower Lava to dry the engine out and get the darn boat to run. Finally got it pulled into shore. Anyway, that was my training trip. And the next trip I had people. Far cry from nowadays.
What was that like? Did they know it was your first time?
Oh, heck no. And I lied about my age and everything. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm 22. Old man. Yeah, I've been working on it for a couple of years now, yeah. I had a fair amount of experience, but, that was like one motor trip's experience was all I had. I'd done a lot of rowing up on the Green and Yampa up in Vernal, but so I felt like I was a pretty good hand. I was confident. Had some pretty wild runs, though, over the years.